Hey, good morning. Happy Monday. Jamie here, and we get another week to continue building the lives and the careers that we desire. I know I say that every week, and I'm going to keep saying it, but it's true. All right, so in this video, what we're going to be covering is we're going to talk about a very deep core behavioral pattern that everybody has. And there's two different ways that we implement this behavioral pattern. There are two different ways that we have this pattern. So most people find themselves in consistently making decisions and taking action and really living in all areas of their life based on putting pleasure over purpose. But then there's the smaller group of people that do the exact opposite, where they consistently put purpose over pleasure. And so in this video, we're going to talk about these two different behaviors, patterns, and what is the effect or the results long-term, both short-term and long-term, for your life and career if you live with these two different patterns. And then we're going to end the video. I have a small little action item for you to take this week that's going to help you deeply understand this core behavior pattern within yourself. Now, the reason this is so important is this behavioral pattern literally affects every single part of your life. Every part of your life, relationships, fitness, nutrition, overall health, your relationships with other people, how you do your personal development. It's going to affect how you react to certain situations. It affects how you make decisions in your career. So it is super important that you understand which pattern have you been running and whether or not you want to keep running that pattern. So I'm excited, and let's dive in. All right, so let's start by talking about the most common behavioral pattern that exists. And that is when someone is consistently making decisions and taking actions based on putting pleasure over purpose. Now, you know when someone is putting pleasure over purpose because they say things like, I don't feel like it, or I don't want to. Now, when someone says I don't feel like it or I don't want to, there's really not a logical basis behind that other than their feelings. And so it's not a logical argument, it's not a logical decision, but instead it's an emotional decision. And so you can think of this as people live most of their lives based on emotions and just making emotional decisions. I don't feel like it or I don't want to. Now, this might not sound like a big problem, but over the long term, it is. And the reason I believe that this is a problem over the long term and it's unsustainable is because it's built on a belief that pleasure is more important than purpose. And if someone has this belief and this behavioral pattern over the long term, that's eventually going to lead to laziness, procrastination. It's also going to lead to complacency and also envy, where someone has negative feelings because someone has something that they want, but they're not willing to do the work or do what's required in order to go get it. And no one will ever admit that it's a feeling of envy, but you know it when it comes out as a negative sentiment. When someone, kind of criticizes someone else, but there's really no basis other than it's just raw emotion. So over the long term, kind of the second effect that, now, is this always the case? Not always. It needs to be an extreme case, but in the extreme case, it eventually leads to people stop working for things and they begin expecting things or they begin demanding things. Now, do people find themselves 100% in this pattern? No. And that's where I think that there's a split and a spectrum of where someone finds themselves in this pattern. So as an example, we could say that the average worker probably find themselves 80% in the pattern of making decisions and taking actions based on putting pleasure over purpose, and maybe 20% the opposite. And the opposite would be putting purpose over pleasure. So 20% of the time they'll do what they need to do in order to meet expectations or get by or to consistently maintain what they have. But then the other 80% of their time or their decisions and actions is spent searching for pleasure. And they find pleasure in movies, in TV shows, in any other form of entertainment, in alcohol or drugs, or hanging out with family and friends, or doing something, going to some event. So it's not that all of these things are bad and not that all of them are good. There's always bad ways and good ways to find pleasure, but people spend most of their lives going from searching for one form of pleasure to another form of pleasure to another form, and they consistently literally just live their whole life searching for pleasure over and over and over again. Now, what that means is when someone doesn't have that sense of purpose of why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I alive? Why am I doing the work? Why am I going to this thing? Why am I turning on this TV show other than to pass the time? Most people live their lives passing time, just going through the motions. And long term, that's going to lead to a feeling of emptiness, a feeling of a lack of fulfillment, and feeling like you're not making an impact on something, feeling like a lack of self-discipline, a lack of self-confidence. It leaves you empty kind of inside when you're just, all you're doing is going for pleasure. And one of the main reasons behind that is when you're searching for pleasure, it's all about you. It's a very selfish pattern. It's all about what's going to make me happy, what's going to make me satisfied, what's going to make me feel pleasure. But that gets old. It gets really old constantly living just for ourselves. Now, if someone finds themselves deep into this pattern and they maintain this pattern over the long term, we can have a pretty clear idea of where that person's life will end up or where that person's career will end up. It's a very clear path, and that is going to be slightly more of what they already have today. It's going to be slightly more pleasurable than it is today. And it's also going to lead to a lack of self-confidence or lack of fulfillment. Because again, it's constantly about them. And if they have that feeling of emptiness of, why am I here? What is the purpose? That destroys self-confidence over the long term. And then finally, it's going to lead to a lack of motivation or inspiration to really do anything big or anything challenging or difficult or painful or uncertain, really to do anything long term. And the reason for that is when you embark on these journeys or these initiatives or these projects that are long term, it's usually in the beginning, it's not pleasurable. There is pain, there is uncertainty, and all these these negative parts that if all they're seeking is pleasure, they're not going to start working on these things. And it's because there's no pleasure in it. But the pleasure comes in the long term when if you do something that is difficult or challenging or uncertain or a long-term project and you do complete that, well, in the long term, there's a deep sense of pleasure, and there's also a very deep sense of fulfillment and confidence that I set my mind to something and I did it. And that is going to be a fulfilling, confidence-boosting result when you did something that you believed was important and had purpose. Now, this pattern is a part of your core mindset. And I like to think of your mindset as it's your operating system. It's both your conscious mind and your unconscious mind. It's how you perceive everything. It's how you make decisions. It's how you live your life and your career. So if someone has this pattern, I want to give some examples of how this pattern is going to affect every single area of your life. And I've written down some examples. So when someone doesn't work out because it's hard and painful, when someone doesn't eat healthily because it doesn't taste good, when someone doesn't read or develop themselves because it's not fun, when someone doesn't respond to important or difficult messages because it can be stressful, when someone doesn't get up after the first alarm because they don't feel like it, when someone becomes impatient after waiting for 5 seconds at a stoplight and the car ahead of them doesn't go on green, when someone doesn't negotiate for what they're worth because it's uncomfortable, when someone doesn't do the chores or clean up around the house because it's not entertaining or fun, when someone doesn't call their parents or a friend when they said they would because they just didn't feel like it. And again, this is something that those are just some examples, but having this behavioral pattern will affect every area of your life. Now, I want to throw in an interesting caveat here. Now, let's say that someone has everything that they want. The life that they currently have is pretty much equal to the future that they want. So they don't want more. Well, in that case, that person should, sing, dance, be happy, carry on, enjoy themselves, and keep living as they're living because they already have everything that they want. And in that case, live as long as possible and enjoy yourself. But that's not often the case where a lot of people find themselves. A lot of people find themselves in situations where they say, this is everything I want and I don't want anything more, but deep down they do want more. And those are the types of people that then form the negative sentiments against people who have more. And so there's that disconnect of that, this pattern is leading them in the direction of having slightly more of what they already have. And they're not changing the pattern. They're continuing to run this pattern. But at the same time, they're criticizing or, negatively thinking about or judging other people who do have more. but those people are running a different pattern. And this person is not willing to change. And I know this sounds, people immediately start thinking of politics or business or, all these different applications. And I just want to give a really simple example because I don't want to make this political or in terms of business or wealth or anything like that. But I think a really clear example or metaphor that makes this easy to see is, let's imagine that there's someone who works out for 6 months straight and they work out every single day, or not every day, but let's say 6 days, 6 days a week. And then they have a rest day for 1 or 2 days. They watch their eating. They don't eat any junk food. They count their calories, their macros, their micros. Like they're just very intensely focused on their physique, their health, their fitness, for 6 months. Well, that person's probably going to look like a champion 6 months later. And if they're on a beach with, in their bathing suit walking around, well, everybody's going to notice, but you don't see people throwing stones or criticizing that person. If anything, they're kind of like, oh my gosh, look at that person. It's more of an awe thing. Like, wow, guys, got man or woman's chiseled. So there's that positive / neutral sentiment. But if you were to replace that, physique with money, all of a sudden people respond to that very differently. But at the end of the day, it's the same behavioral patterns. It's just a different emotional reaction to someone else's situation. All right, so now let's talk about the opposite side of this pattern. So this is when someone lives their lives and they're constantly making decisions and actions by putting purpose over pleasure. Again, they're putting purpose over pleasure. Now, what this is going to lead to and how someone runs this pattern is when they're primarily making decisions and actions based on a desired outcome, or think of that as a goal, or based on helping other people. So it's usually going to be one of those two things. And they're making a decision and deciding to take action or not based on, is it important? Is this thing important? If it's important, I will do it. And if it's not important, I won't do it. I'll do something else that's important. And this is going to lead to, long-term, a deep sense of fulfillment and a deep sense of purpose. You know why you're doing what you're doing. And this drives you to do what's important, regardless of whether or not you want to do it or regardless of whether or not you feel like doing it. Now, a lot of people call this discipline. And that's essentially all this pattern is when if something's important, you do it. It doesn't matter if you don't feel like doing it. It doesn't matter if you want to do it. You do it anyways. That, at its essence, that is discipline. Now, in order to have this mindset, there are two things that are required. And the first thing that's required is you need to know what is the desired outcome. What is the end result that I want? And the second part is you need to know the difference, or at least you have an idea of the difference of what is important to you and what is not important to you. So again, the two things you have to have in order to have this sense of discipline or putting purpose over pleasure is, one, you need to know what is your desired outcome. But then two is you need to know what's important and what's not important. Now, all of the most successful people in the world, from any area of business, philanthropy, politics, or really any other area, sports and entertainment, all of these people have this pattern, this behavioral pattern of knowing I need to do something because it's important and I'm going to do it regardless. They're consistently putting purpose over pleasure. They're willing to take on long-term projects or long-term goals, even though it's not going to be fun. They're willing to do it because it is so important to them, or in order to achieve this outcome, or it's very important to someone that they care about, or a group of people, or serving someone that they care about. So what this pattern is eventually going to lead to long-term is it's going to lead to better relationships, because you're willing to do things in a relationship that might be tough, but you know it's for the greater good. It's for the health of the relationship. It's going to lead to personal development because you're going to be willing to study or to learn or to develop yourself in the short term in order to maximize and really benefit in every way, career and personally, long term. It's going to lead to career success. It's going to lead to financial success. It's going to lead to, again, that deep sense of self-confidence, of fulfillment, of I did important work. I know what I did. I know why I did it, and I'm confident. I'm fulfilled by that. But the single most important long-term result of having this purpose over pleasure mindset is it's going to lead to health. It's going to lead to deep long-term longevity. And that's going to allow you to live longer and be healthier. And it's a lot of people, it's not about just living forever or not forever, but a long time. It's not about making it to 100. It's about the quality of life to 100. And based on where technology is going and everything, all the developments in healthcare and medicine and biotech, we could be living a lot longer, especially if you're a younger generation. And so what we need to have is we need health, and we want a great quality of life for a long period of time. And the longer we live and the more, the higher that quality of life is, the more we can continue contributing and doing things that are important and meaningful. And when we think of the benefits of that long term, it's going to be financial, it's going to be fulfillment, it's going to be, service to others or building something that you deeply care about. The options are unlimited. But the moment that health is taken away, everything else crumbles. Everything falls apart. Now, kind of the final part here is, does that mean that you never enjoy life if someone has this mindset of consistently putting purpose over pleasure? Kind of as I alluded to in the beginning of the video, most people are not in one extreme camp. I only put pleasure over purpose, or I only put purpose over pleasure. There's a spectrum. And that's where, if we were to look at the most successful people in the world, they're probably, 90% purpose over pleasure. And then that last 10%, maybe it's one day a week or something where they're going out, they're, spending time with family or friends or enjoying themselves. So the question is, where are we, as individuals in our lives, where are we on this spectrum? Are we all purpose over pleasure, or are we all pleasure over purpose? Most likely not one of the two extremes. We're going to be somewhere in the middle. And where we are on this spectrum is going to massively influence where our lives and our careers, our relationships, our financial wealth, where everything ends up in the long term. So the action item I have for you this week is to take a blank sheet of paper and write down Monday through Sunday. So write down 7 days of the week, and then take some time. This might take 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or maybe even a little bit longer, but take some time to pull up your calendar or just think through the last 7 days that you were alive and ask yourself, what did I spend my time doing? And ask yourself, what did I do? But then you want to ask yourself also, why did I do that? Was I doing it to just pass time because I just wanted something pleasurable to pass the time? Or did I consciously make the decision that this thing was important to me, and because it was important to me, I decided to do it? Now, kind of an example here is, some people say, all right, well, spending time with friends and family, is that a bad thing? No, absolutely not. Or watching a movie, is that necessarily a bad thing? No. But the decision was made to either I'm doing this just to pass time, or I'm doing this because I consciously wanted and deeply wanted to spend that time with, this person or with these group of people, or, this was a movie I've been wanting to see. And so I actively made that decision to watch that movie. So there's a difference between consciously making the decision to do something because it was important to you, and the other side is just doing things without even really thinking about them. It's just going from pleasure to pleasure to pleasure with really no conscious thought. It's just passing time and going through the motions. So take some time, reflect on the last 7 days, and think about, what did I spend my time doing, and why did I actually do those things? And it'll be interesting to I think about that. And then finally is just, kind of nail down on that spectrum, where do I think I fall? Am I primarily making or living pleasure over purpose, or am I primarily living by putting purpose over pleasure? And am I willing to do things that maybe I don't feel like it or I don't want to, but I know are important to me? So if you found this video helpful, please give it a like. I come out with these videos every single week. Subscribe to my channel. I would love to be able to share this content with you every single Monday. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next Monday morning.